There was no thunder when she changed. No sharp words. No slamming doors. Just silence, the kind that grows roots in the corners of a room and wraps itself around your lungs when you aren't paying attention. My name is Calden. I'm not dramatic, and I'm not broken. But I've lived in a house where the walls forgot my name, where the woman I loved stopped seeing me even though I stood 3 feet away from her every morning. Corinne, my wife, didn't leave. She didn't cheat. She didn't yell or blame or even ask for space. She just became smaller in my life. Like a fading photograph on a shelf no one dusts anymore. It started with the way she stopped telling me about her day. I didn't notice it right away. At first, it just felt like less noise. Less chatter about work politics or the lady at the yoga studio who wore shoes on the mat. But after a while, I realized I hadn't heard her laugh in our kitchen in weeks. I hadn't felt her hand brush mine while we made coffee. Her eyes stayed down when she passed me, as if eye contact had become too expensive. And so I waited. I waited for her to return to me, in the quiet moments before sleep, in the pauses between dinner and dishes, in the space where her voice used to be. But she never came. She existed in the house, like wallpaper. She moved around me but not with me. I asked her once, gently, "Are you okay?" She smiled. Not a real one. The kind you give a cashier who hands you the wrong change. "I'm fine, just tired." And that was it. A sentence with a period that felt more like a wall. I began noticing the way her presence rearranged itself. She sat farther from me on the couch. She wore headphones more often. Her phone never left her side, but not because she was hiding something. It was worse than that. She just didn't feel like sharing anything anymore. I started waking up before her and just watching the light crawl across the bedroom ceiling. I'd lie there, listening to her breathe beside me, and realize how lonely it felt to be in a bed with someone who was no longer truly there. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I didn't accuse. I didn't try to win her back with grand gestures or quotes from old love letters. I just watched the silence between us grow taller than the house itself. And then, one morning, not special, not loud, not even sad, I stood up, without a word, and left the room. Not forever. Not in anger. But for the first time in months, I walked away without hoping she'd stop me. And she didn't. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't slam the door. I just walked out of the house and listened to the screen door creak behind me, like even it wasn't sure I'm in it. There's something strange about leaving without a plan. It feels like walking off a stage mid-sentence. But the truth is, I'd stopped speaking long before I stood up. I went to the old marina. Not because I had a boat, or memories there, but because no one talks to you near water. They let you stare. They let you breathe. I watched the wind pull at the lake's surface until it looked like everything was rippling in disagreement. The sky, the water, the past. I sat on a bench for what felt like an entire season and thought about how we got here. How a woman who once made a second cup of coffee just because she knew I'd forget mine had started forgetting me entirely. And still, there was no villain. No late-night messages on her phone. No cologne that wasn't mine. No lipstick stains or lies or shattered glass. Just the slow draining of a connection. We used to talk in our sleep, not real words. But those half-conscious murmurs couples share when their hearts are still tied together even after their mouths forget how to communicate. I remember one night, a few years ago, Corinne whispered, "Don't forget the raspberries." And I knew exactly what she meant. We were supposed to bake together the next morning. It meant she was thinking of me even in her dreams. Now, she barely moved when I climbed into bed. The sound of her silence had become louder than any fight I'd ever heard. You can learn to live without yelling. But you can't survive the sound of someone who no longer misses your presence. That morning, after I left, I turned off my phone. Not because I expected her to call, but because a small part of me hoped she might. And I wasn't ready for the weight of that hope collapsing under nothing. I drove. No direction. Just away. Past towns that still had diners where people made eye contact. Past gas stations with broken neon signs and families arguing about road trip snacks. Past pieces of America that still looked like they cared. I kept hearing things she hadn't said. "Where are you going? Why didn't you wake me? Is this about us?" But she didn't say any of those things. And that's what hurt most. I didn't check into a hotel. I didn't look for a friend's couch or call anyone to tell them where I'd gone. I just kept driving until the road thinned out and the GPS stopped trying to suggest anything. There's a motel in Calden, the kind built before fast food chains had their logos figured out. The sign buzzed weakly like it had a memory of being important. The woman at the desk gave me a room key without asking questions. That was what I wanted. No questions, no assumptions, just space where I could hear myself think without the static of familiarity. The room was small, but clean in the way that says someone still bothers. It smelled faintly of lemon and old curtains. I dropped my keys on the dresser and stood there in the center of the room for a long time, doing nothing. No thoughts, just stillness. I could feel it in my body. The difference between being alone and being left. What haunted me most was that I hadn't been left, not really. I was still married, still tethered by paper and memory. But I had already been emotionally left months ago, piece by piece, and only now did I realize how far I had drifted from the shore. I thought I might cry, not out of drama, but out of exhaustion. But I didn't. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about the last time Corinne touched me without a reason. Not a tap on the shoulder, not a handoff of the remote. I mean really touched me, the kind of touch that says, I see you. I couldn't remember it. I remembered birthdays, dinners, bills paid on time, vacations with photos that looked happier than they felt. But not that. Not closeness. I started to wonder if maybe I'd become forgettable. Not just to her, but in general. Maybe my kindness had been too quiet. Maybe my loyalty had been invisible. There's no parade for a man who listens. No ceremony for a husband who always shows up but never demands the spotlight. I didn't want to be praised, but I wanted to matter. There was one moment, two, maybe, in the past year when I almost asked her directly, "Are you falling out of love with me?" But I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. And asking the question would have been like opening a window during a hurricane. I wasn't ready for the wreckage. Outside the motel, the sky went soft and colorless. The kind of gray that doesn't threaten rain but makes everything look like a faded photograph. I stood there and let the quiet air settle over me. No horns. No phone buzzing. No one calling my name. It was peace, but it also felt like disappearing. I wasn't angry at Corinne. That's what surprised me most. There was no betrayal to scream about. No secret lover. No money missing. No harsh words. It was just erosion. The way wind wears down stone. The way routine replaces romance. And neither of us noticed it happening until the ground beneath us had already turned to dust. I didn't leave because I hated her. I left because I couldn't feel myself anymore when I was around her. I left because I needed to remember who I was when no one was watching. I needed to know if I still had a voice in a world that stopped listening. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay on the unfamiliar mattress, listening to the hum of the fridge and the occasional truck passing in the distance. I wasn't thinking about divorce. I wasn't thinking about the future. I just stared at the ceiling and realized, maybe for the first time in years, that I had stopped waiting for things to get better. There's a specific kind of silence that follows you after you've walked away. Not the kind that greets you immediately, but the kind that arrives later, like an echo you didn't expect. I felt it the next morning. Not as regret. I hadn't made a mistake, but as a strange emptiness that came from not being needed. No messages. No calls. Not even a "where are you?" from Corinne. And maybe that's what settled it in my chest, the absence of surprise. She wasn't confused that I was gone. She had already gotten used to life without me, even while I was still sleeping beside her. The motel room held no memories, which in itself was a kind of relief. There were no shared coffee mugs, no throw pillows we argued about in the store, no half-folded blankets draped over the back of the couch. Nothing that reminded me of us, which made it easier to breathe, but also harder to feel real. I tried to read a book I brought. I couldn't get past the first few paragraphs. My eyes moved across the lines, but nothing stayed. The characters didn't have weight. Their problems felt hollow. Not because the writing was bad, but because I couldn't stop thinking about a moment that seemed completely irrelevant, and yet kept returning to me like a skipped heartbeat. It was a Wednesday sometime last fall. Corinne had come home with a small bag of apples. She told me the ones at the market were overripe, but she found a few decent ones at the back. She washed them, cut them, added cinnamon, and made a pie that afternoon. I remember because she didn't speak while doing it, not a word, and yet I watched her hum softly as she rolled out the dough. It was a simple, thoughtless gesture, and yet it stayed with me. Maybe because that was the last time I remember her doing something without being asked, without it feeling like obligation. The pie wasn't great. She apologized for the crust, but I said it was fine. It was fine. But what I really meant was, please stay in this moment just a little longer. Of course, I didn't say that. We never say the real thing in the moment. We save it for when it's too late, when there's no one left to hear it. I realized then that our marriage hadn't been failing because of one big issue. It was hundreds of little missed chances. 1,000 tiny silences we let stack between us like bricks. Neither of us tore anything down. We just stopped building. I took a walk in the late afternoon. A park nearby, mostly empty. There was a woman on a bench feeding birds. She looked at peace, like someone who had made peace with being alone. I wondered if I would ever get there, to that level of stillness. Because right now, all I had was noise. Not loud noise, but the kind that hums just below the surface, unfinished conversations, unreplied texts, Sunday mornings that no longer had breakfast smells. It's strange how your body keeps expecting someone. Even after you've left, you still have to turn your head waiting to hear them call your name. You still instinctively check your phone during the quiet hours, hoping for something you know won't come. I went back to the room and stood in the doorway before turning on the light. I looked at the bed, the desk, the TV, the half-full glass of water. And I whispered, to no one in particular, "Do I still exist here?" Because I honestly wasn't sure. I realized I didn't remember the last time Corinne asked me what I wanted for dinner. It sounds ridiculous, insignificant, even, but I used to think those small things were the glue. Pasta or stir-fry? That used to mean, you matter in this space. At some point, the question stopped coming. She just made what she wanted. And I ate it, quietly, grateful just to be fed. I told myself it was convenience. But it wasn't. It was a small signal, lost in the noise of our ordinary life. There's a lamp in our living room that flickers sometimes. It's been doing it for over a year. I never fixed it. I kept saying I would, but I didn't. I wonder now if she thought that meant I'd stopped caring, or if she stopped asking me to fix it because she didn't want to give me another thing to fail at. Funny how things break slowly. Even people. The next day at the motel, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm. Just open eyes and a strange stillness inside me. I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel loss. Just a hollow sort of balance, like standing in the middle of a bridge at dusk, unsure if you're walking home or running from it. I thought about going back. Not because I missed her, but because I missed who I was before all the quiet. Before love became routine. Before she stopped reaching for my hand during movies. Before the hallway between our bedroom and kitchen started to feel like two separate countries. But what would I say if I went back? Hey, I needed to disappear for a few days to feel real again. I'm back now. Can we talk? But talk about what? The silence wasn't a single event. It was years of unspoken things. Her disappointments, my defenses. Her fading spark, my increasing hesitation. You can't dissect a ghost. You just feel it brush past you every time you try to reach for something that isn't there anymore. So I stayed. I didn't call. Didn't message. Not out of pettiness, but because there was nothing I could say that wouldn't sound like begging for crumbs of attention. I didn't want a text that said, okay. Or worse, why? I didn't want to have to explain the loneliness that had no sharp edge. It was soft. Too soft. Like being wrapped in fog until you forget what sunlight feels like. I sat in the parking lot that afternoon and watched a man teach his son how to parallel park. Over and over, the boy hit the curb. And over, the father just smiled and motioned for him to try again. I kept wondering what it would feel like to be coached like that, gently, and how to reconnect with someone you no longer understood. But marriage doesn't come with that kind of training. We assume love is enough. That showing up is enough. That time will take care of the rest. We don't talk about what happens when love stops being seen. We don't talk about when silence becomes the only thing you trust not to hurt you. The sound of gravel under my shoes. That's the first thing I noticed that morning. The soft crunch, the weight of each step. I hadn't paid attention to how I moved in a long time. At home, the hallway was just a hallway. I walked it 1,000 times a year and never felt the floor. Now I was counting every step from the motel door to the vending machine. That's how far I'd gotten. 20 feet. But it felt like a pilgrimage. I bought a bottle of water I didn't need. Just wanted to hear something mechanical work without failing. A machine that took your money and gave you what you asked for. Simple, predictable. I didn't want a conversation. I didn't want an apology. I just wanted exact change in cold plastic. I sat at a picnic table behind the building. Weathered wood, a cracked bench, and a tree stump someone had carved a heart into years ago. It was still there. The initials were faded. Time had tried to erase them, but the grooves were too deep. That's when I thought of Corinne's handwriting. Not the way she signed birthday cards. I mean the way she wrote grocery lists, bold, upright, clear. Every word had a purpose. You could see her mind in the way she spaced her letters. Efficient. Direct. I used to keep those little notes. Not because they were romantic, but because they were real. No, I couldn't remember the last time she wrote something for me by hand. We texted. We emailed. We left reminders in calendar apps. But there hadn't been anything with ink in a long time. Nothing stuck to the fridge. Nothing taped to the bathroom mirror. I used to find sticky notes in my lunch bag with things like, "Don't forget to smile today." And now I wasn't sure if she even noticed when I didn't smile at all. It's strange how absence doesn't always show up loudly. Sometimes it waits. It builds its nest inside familiar things. A drawer that no longer sticks. A drawer you stopped opening. I wondered if she was thinking of me. Not in a desperate way, but honestly. Was she pacing? Was she calling my name into empty rooms just to hear it? Or was the silence I left behind already familiar to her? Maybe my absence was easier to digest than my presence had become. That thought didn't hurt. It simply settled inside me like dust. There was a man outside the gas station nearby, probably mid-60s, polishing the hood of a car that didn't need polishing. He was focused. Deliberate. I respected that. You don't wipe something over and over unless it matters to you. And I realized then, maybe I had stopped doing that. Maybe I stopped wiping down the things I cared about. Maybe I thought marriage would shine on its own. Maybe she thought the same. So we let it dull. Together. Silently. Without cruelty. Without crisis. Just quietly, until the reflection we once saw in each other was gone. The coffee was bitter. That surprised me. I'd added sugar, cream, stirred it twice, like always. Still, it tasted sharp. Not burnt. Just off. Maybe it was the motel's water. Or maybe I was finally tasting things again. I sat at the edge of the bed and didn't scroll my phone. I didn't check messages. I didn't even turn on the lamp. Just sat there in the half-light, watching steam lift from the cup. No knock at the door. No "come home" text. No question mark floating in the air. And yet, I wasn't lonely. Not in the way I feared I'd be. I wasn't wishing for her voice. I was just sitting. Still. Quiet. The silence was mine now. A memory. She used to trace her finger along my shoulder blade when I slept. Not every night. Just sometimes, when she thought I wouldn't notice. I never told her I was awake. I didn't want to interrupt it. That touch, featherlight, had meant more than any gift she ever gave me. But it stopped long before I noticed. I don't know if she realized it, either. Some things we just stopped doing. There was a breeze that morning. Cool. Soft. It carried nothing particular, no smell of breakfast, no hint of rain. But it felt real against my skin. I let it in. Opened the door. Stood there like someone who had nothing urgent to do, and no one to pretend for. I used to measure my days by her rhythms. When she'd wake up. When she'd sigh. When she'd stand at the sink too long without saying anything. Now I had nothing to react to. Just me. And the sound of the ice machine outside, humming like a tired lullaby. I don't know if this is a break. Or the beginning of an ending. Or just a long pause between people who forgot how to look at each other. But for the first time in years, I feel like I'm not performing. Not trying to be agreeable. Not filling silences. Not waiting for affection like it's a ration. Maybe this is what clarity feels like. Not fireworks. Not closure. Just a slow, quiet understanding that you were no longer seen. And that somehow, you let it happen. It didn't happen suddenly. I didn't wake up with an epiphany or stare into a mirror and find a stranger. I didn't make a dramatic call or write a letter or whisper my pain into the sunrise. Instead, I folded my clothes. I zipped up my overnight bag. I rinsed out the cup I'd been using all week. The same plastic one with the faded motel logo. And left it on the sink with the faucet running gently, the way Corinne used to when she wanted the water to warm before washing her face. I didn't know where I was going next. But this time, the uncertainty felt clean, like a blank page, not a lost one. I walked out into the parking lot. It was just after 7. Pale gold light touched the tops of cars and the grass beyond the pavement. The world hadn't fully stretched yet. There was space between sounds. The kind of morning you don't rush through. I stood there for a while, letting it wash over me. And then, for no particular reason, I smiled. Not because everything made sense. Not because anything was fixed. But because I was still here. And I hadn't vanished. I had simply gone quiet long enough to hear the difference between being alone and being free. I didn't hate her. Corinne. I don't know if I ever could. We built something together, even if it no longer fit us. Even if we forgot how to carry it. There were still memories that deserved gentleness. Still mornings that deserved gratitude. She gave me seasons I'll never unlive. And maybe that's enough. We weren't broken people. Just two people who forgot how to meet each other in the middle. And now, I don't need answers from her. I don't need to be rescued, or pursued, or understood. I've learned to be still with myself, to live in the quiet without disappearing into it. The silence I once feared has become the softest place I've ever known. And wherever I go next, whether back to her or towards something entirely new, I'll bring that peace with me. No anger, no blame, just a man who finally stood up, said nothing, and walked toward himself.